Picture an ordinary Tuesday morning at a red light. In the left lane sits a brand new blacked-out luxury SUV, still wearing the dealer plate, freshly washed, the kind of vehicle that turns heads. In the right lane, idling quietly beside it, is a 10-year-old Honda with a small dent in the front bumper and a travel coffee mug on the dashboard. Almost everybody has already formed an answer about which driver is wealthy. Here is where it gets interesting. In America in 2026, the statistically smarter bet is the dented Honda. The person commanding the luxury SUV is far more likely to be financially underwater. The person in the Honda is far more likely to be genuinely free. So how did we arrive at a moment where the people who appear the wealthiest are frequently the most financially fragile, while the people quietly accumulating real wealth go out of their way to look unremarkable? Because looking modest on purpose turns out to be one of the most powerful financial decisions a person can make. A decade ago, the loudest spenders were a smaller, more recognizable crowd. Today, they are woven into everyday life, and a striking proportion are running on almost nothing. Heading into 2026, roughly 60% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck. Around 40% of people earning six figures, $100,000 a year or more, were finishing each month with nothing left over. 2 out of every 5 high earners, the exact people society identifies as having figured it out, were one unexpected expense away from a genuine crisis. The average American household now spends approximately $6,500 monthly just to maintain a basic life, working out to roughly $78,000 annually before a single luxury. Meanwhile, the personal savings rate sat at approximately 4.5% in early 2026, historically about half of what previous generations managed. More than half of American adults could not cover a surprise $1,000 expense from savings. Over a quarter reported having no emergency cushion at all, the highest figure ever recorded. One survey placed the typical emergency savings balance at around $600. That is the financial reality quietly humming beneath the glossy car payments and the curated photographs. The loud version of wealth and the real version of wealth are rarely the same people. We have simply been trained over decades to confuse them. The human beings are wired to read status signals. For most of our history, those signals carried real survival information: who had resources, who had protection, who was worth aligning with. That instinct never went away. It simply got redirected. Today, the signals are a watch, a logo, a vehicle, a renovated kitchen, a vacation photographed at exactly the right angle. We are not really purchasing the object. We are purchasing a sentence we hope other people will form about us when they see it. The deeper problem is that the people we are performing for are simultaneously performing right back at us, which means everyone is dressing for an audience far too consumed by its own appearance to notice anyone else's. Economists call this the hedonic treadmill. You acquire the better car, feel the lift for a few weeks, and then that car quietly becomes your new baseline. The emotional reward fades, and you begin reaching for the next upgrade to recreate the same feeling. You are running in place, and the most punishing twist is that the treadmill accelerates as income grows. A raise that could have purchased genuine freedom instead purchased a heavier stack of monthly obligations. The faster they ran, the more firmly they remained exactly where they started. There is a subtler mechanism that makes the whole thing worse. One meaningful upgrade quietly demands a series of additional purchases simply to maintain coherence. Buy a beautiful new chair, and suddenly the rest of the room looks dated. The couch has to go. Then the rug. Then the curtains. Then the table. One upgrade resets the baseline, and everything around it must rise to meet the new standard. The same cascade operates at larger scale. Move into a more expensive neighborhood, and the unspoken expectations arrive without invitation: the kind of car that belongs in that driveway, the vacations surrounding families take, the schools, the renovations, the version of yourself the zip code seems to require. The people who build wealth and keep it tend to recognize this cascade early and refuse to initiate it. They understand that the most expensive element of many purchases is not the purchase itself. It is everything that purchase quietly obligates you to acquire next. The hard numbers begin with the single most visible status symbol: the automobile. In December 2025, the average price paid for a new vehicle reached a record high of just over $50,000. The average monthly payment climbed to nearly $770. The average new car loan runs around $44,000. To make those payments survivable, buyers are stretching loan terms to lengths that would have seemed absurd a generation ago. More than a third of new car loans now run longer than 6 years. 85-month terms over 7 years of payments on a machine engineered to lose value the moment it leaves the lot are increasingly common. Nearly 1 in 5 new car loans carries a monthly payment above $1,000, and the majority of those payments are not for exotic vehicles. They are for ordinary trucks and family SUVs purchased by ordinary people who decided the monthly payment was simply the cost of appearing like they had arrived somewhere. A new vehicle typically loses a fifth or more of its value within the first year alone. When someone commits to an 85-month loan, there is a significant stretch in the middle where they owe more on the vehicle than it is actually worth. If the car is totaled or they need to sell, the loan does not adjust. They are personally responsible for the difference. Americans now carry more than $1.67 trillion in auto loan debt. The object we treat as the obvious signal of financial success has quietly become one of the largest anchors dragging ordinary households underwater. Consider a simple alternative. Take that average new car payment, round it to $750 monthly, and instead of financing a depreciating asset, drive a reliable used car that is already paid off and redirect that same $750 into a low-cost index fund every month. At a long-run average return of roughly 7% after inflation, that habit produces well over $100,000 in 10 years. Sustained for 30 years, the account grows to a figure approaching $900,000. The real choice was never between a nicer car and a boring car. It was between a nicer car now and approximately $1 million later. The automobile is simply the most visible example, because the identical logic runs directly through the largest purchase most people ever make their home. Every significant possession pulls an entire ecosystem of supporting expenses behind it. A larger house is not simply a larger monthly payment. It is higher property taxes, higher insurance premiums, higher heating and cooling costs, more maintenance across more square footage, and the slow pressure to fill additional rooms with furniture that would never have been purchased if those rooms did not exist. One decision quietly multiplies into a dozen. The genuinely wealthy tend to run that full calculation before committing, which is why so many of them live in homes noticeably more modest than their net worth could justify. Americans were carrying approximately $1.25 trillion in credit card debt at the start of 2026, for households carrying a balance. The average sat near $6,700. The average interest rate on cards actively charging interest was roughly 21%. When you finance a lifestyle on a card at that rate, you are paying for the item and then paying the financial institution a substantial ongoing fee for the privilege of pretending you could afford it. Total American household debt has crossed $18.8 trillion. A meaningful portion of that total is not survival spending or genuine emergency. It is the ongoing operating cost of a performance that quietly drains the person wearing it. The number nobody sees income announces itself loudly. Net worth stays almost completely silent. And in America, the distance between those two figures is extraordinary. The median household net worth sits at around $192,000. The average gets reported as approximately $1.06 million because a small number of enormously wealthy households pull the mean dramatically upward. The median is the honest picture. For households under 35, the median net worth sits near $39,000, while older households sit many times higher. Here is the finding researchers return to consistently: your savings rate predicts your future wealth more accurately than your income does. A high earner who saves almost nothing ends up with less in retirement than a moderate earner who quietly set aside a meaningful portion of everything they earned for decades. The faucet does not determine who ends up wealthy. What you do with the water does. The house with the boat in the driveway and 2 new trucks parked outside is no longer automatically the wealthy house. It might be. Or it might be the most heavily leveraged household on the block, one bad quarter away from a forced sale. The neighbor with the older paid-off vehicle and the lawn furniture that has lasted 15 years might be sitting on a portfolio that would genuinely surprise you. You cannot determine the answer from the outside, and that is precisely what the quietly wealthy are counting on. What the genuinely wealthy actually do research at Experian Automotive found that 61% of households earning more than $250,000 annually do not drive luxury vehicles at all. They drive Hondas and Toyotas and Fords, the same makes sitting in ordinary driveways across the country. Someone earning $250,000 a year could obviously afford the badge. The majority simply choose not to acquire it. Decades of research into how actual millionaires behave produced findings that still catch people off guard. Most American car buyers commit close to a third of their net worth to vehicles. Actual millionaires average around 1%. Fewer than a quarter were driving a current year model. They purchase used, they select for quality and reliability, they drive until the vehicle genuinely cannot continue, and they rarely finance the purchase. A survey of over 600 American millionaires arrived at the identical place. Frugality appeared not as an occasional habit, but as a consistent way of operating. Around 69% of millionaires never averaged 6 figures in household income in a single year. Nearly a third never had a 6-figure household income across their entire careers, and roughly 80% built their wealth themselves without inheriting it. The picture that emerges is not one of enormous salaries and spectacular lives. It is one of ordinary incomes meeting extraordinary consistency. When people stop wasting money trying to look wealthy, they finally have the money to actually become wealthy. The single most important distinction: income is not wealth. Income is the water flowing through the faucet. Wealth is the water you actually keep in the tank. A person can have an enormous faucet and a tank with a crack running through the bottom, spending every dollar as quickly as it arrives. They look wealthy and own almost nothing. Another person can have a modest faucet and a completely sealed tank, keeping and investing a real portion of everything they earn, and quietly become the wealthier of the two over time. The luxury SUV signals a large faucet. It tells you nothing about the condition of the tank, and the louder and more visible the signal, the more frequently it is concealing a tank that is nearly empty. The genuinely wealthy stopped competing on faucet size, everyone can observe that, and began competing on tank size, which almost no one can. Looking modest is simply what a full tank looks like from the outside. What genuine wealth actually purchases, the truest measure of wealth, is not the size of the tank. It is what the tank allows you to do. The real question is whether you can walk away from a job that is destroying, whether you can take several months when a family emergency arrives without warning, whether you can relocate for someone you love, or begin a business without a guaranteed income, or decline money that would require compromising something fundamental to who you are. Those choices are what genuine wealth actually purchases, and they are only available to people who build a meaningful gap between what they earn and what they spend. The person earning $200,000 and spending nearly all of it has almost no real option. They are bound to the next paycheck just like everyone else, only surrounded by more expensive furniture. The person earning considerably less but spending well below their income possesses a freedom the high earner can only observe from a distance. Every conspicuous purchase is a trade. You are exchanging future choices for present appearances. First is to decouple your income from your identity. When income rises, their lifestyle largely holds steady, and the difference flows directly into investments. A raise is not an invitation to expand consumption. It is an opportunity to widen the gap between what you earn and what you live on, because that gap, not the salary figure, is what eventually converts into freedom. The second is to make saving automatic and spending structurally difficult. Willpower is a poor long-term strategy because it fails at precisely the wrong moments. The wealthy design their environment instead. They automate transfers into investments on the same day they are paid, before the money ever feels available to spend. They remove shopping applications, delete stored payment information, build a waiting interval between wanting something and purchasing it. A brief cooling period eliminates a large proportion of impulse purchases because most cravings dissolve on their own if not acted upon immediately. Pay yourself first. Most people reverse the sequence: they earn, they spend, and then attempt to save whatever survives. The wealthy invert the order. The third is to drive it until it genuinely stops working and extend that same patience to nearly everything you own. The fastest method for bleeding money slowly is replacing things that still function, either because a newer version launched or because familiarity bred boredom. Before any purchase, estimate how many times it will realistically be used. Divide the price by that number. A $200 jacket worn twice costs $100 every time it is put on. A well-made jacket worn 200 times costs almost nothing per use. The fourth is to test before committing, particularly on anything large or new. The wealthy treat a new interest as a hypothesis to test inexpensively, not an occasion to purchase the complete setup immediately. Rent the equipment for the first few outings. Borrow the tool before buying it. Try the entry-level version before the premium one. The The fifth is to define what enough looks like before the money arrives rather than after. High earners get trapped in permanent dissatisfaction because they never establish a finish line. The wealthy decide in advance what a sufficient home, vehicle, and daily life genuinely require, and then direct every dollar beyond that threshold toward building the tank. A person who decides that a particular annual spending level is sufficient and then earns well past it builds wealth at a pace that appears almost unfair from the outside. The secret is not dramatically higher earnings. It is that the goalpost stopped moving the moment they got close to it. The sixth is the quietest and probably the most difficult. Mute the comparison environment. A substantial share of the pressure to appear wealthy does not originate in real life at all. It streams through a device displaying a carefully constructed highlight reel of people you will never actually meet, the majority of whom are performing a financial comfort they cannot sustain. You are not keeping up with the wealthy. You are attempting to keep pace with other stretched people who happen to be skilled at lighting and framing. That immunity is available to anyone willing to deliberately curate what they allow in. The goal was always freedom. None of these moves are complicated. That is the entire point. Looking modest on purpose has nothing to do with hardship or denying yourself a genuinely good life. It is about refusing to spend money on the opinions of people who are not paying your bills and redirecting that money towards your own freedom instead. The dented Honda at the stoplight is not a symbol of falling behind. To the people who actually understand how wealth is built, it is the quiet calling card of someone who already won and simply chose not to make an announcement about it. The goal was never to look wealthy. The goal was always to be free. And freedom is quiet. It requires no badge, no logo, and no audience. It only requires understanding the game well enough to stop playing the version that was specifically designed to keep you in place. So the next time you feel the pull to spend money proving something to people who are not even paying attention, remember the Honda. And remember that the most powerful financial move you can make is very often the one that nobody around you will ever notice.